Welcome to my chow line, winter edition. We're getting snow here in Georgia, which is crazy. We've already gotten probably about an inch of snow already, and it's still coming down. Well, this cook is going to be special. We're going to be making a brisket stew, a smoked brisket stew. So we're going to get an opportunity to spend some time out here, but I'm going to prep the brisket and trim it, because we're not doing a lot of trimming on the brisket, because we're smoking it, and then we're just going to cube it up and put it in the stew. So we'll probably cube it up a little bit for the smoke. But yeah, I'll try and show you that. See if I can get some way to cover the camera while I do it, because it's continuing to come down out here. So, woo! It's nice and chilly. The snow. It's just warm enough that it's sticking, but the moment you step on it, it turns to water. So, and then it'll turn to ice later tonight. So, anyway, brisket stew. All right, so we're going to be trimming up this brisket. We're going to be doing a down and dirty trim. We've got platoon sergeant and gunpowder seasoning we're going to be using on this brisket. We're going to probably cut it in like 2, maybe 4 pieces, and then put it on the smoker and let it smoke for several hours before we cut it up into small pieces to put in the stew. But we want smaller pieces so we can get more fat, more smoke on it, more of that flavor on it before we put it in the stew, because we're going to do a shorter cook on the brisket. Because normally you would use a leftover brisket for a stew, but this time we're doing it completely for the stew. So in fact, this was cheaper than buying chuck roast for stew. So that's why I wanted to do this, was show you it can be done. I know a lot of times people say, well, you got to do the low and slow for brisket, which is true. But for a stew, you don't have to. You can use leftover, or you can buy just the flats. You can buy the points and do a small one for that. So we're going to go ahead and get this trimmed up. All right, we're going to take some of this hard fat off. And basically all we're doing is we're not going to be trimming it up aerodynamic for like you would for a normal slow over 10-hour brisket cook or 12-hour or 16-hour brisket cook. We're just trying to get some of this hard fat off. All right, down to some softer stuff there. There's a chunk of hard fat here. All right, we've trimmed about enough of that. We're going to go ahead and season it up, or cut it up and then season it up. All right, what we're going to do is I'm going to take these inside and season them inside, because it's now changed from snow to sleet to now it's rain. So I'm going to take this inside, season it inside, so I can keep these dry. And I will tell you, I'm going to do a light of salt, pepper, garlic, the platoon sergeant, and then we'll do a heavy coat of gunpowder. All right, we got our briskets on. We seasoned it up with platoon sergeant gunpowder. You can see coated all the edges really good, leaving some space between so that way the smoke can penetrate. All right, and we're going to get the temperature up to this to around 275, 300 degrees is where we want to try to keep it. We want to try and do a hot fast, because we're going to put this, it'll slow cook in a pot later on, so we're not really worried about getting it up to the 205 and have it break down real easy. It'll do that in the stew, but we're trying to get smoke on it, so we're trying to get good heat. Okay, so we're all about 160 degrees or higher. So these are about ready to come off. This is normally about the time you would, Charlie, start getting ready to wrap for your brisket. So here we've got good color, good bark on these. So we're gonna pull these off, and we'll go ahead and start making our stew. All right, so we're getting ready here to make up our stew. We've got potatoes, onions, carrots, and celery. Now, depending on how much of this brisket you plan on using for stew, we're planning on making a bunch. We're going to freeze some of it, so we'll have some for the rest of the winter. Also, we don't know how long this might last. We might need to warm it back up and have it for the next couple days. Who knows if the power goes out or whatever, because there's already trees falling down again here, because there's ice forming on all the limbs and stuff. And yeah, the trees haven't recovered from the hurricane. So I've got 2 Dutch ovens here that we're going to use. You can use a big stock pot. You can use whatever it is you got at home. I prefer the Dutch ovens because I might put them in a smoker for a little bit. Might leave them exposed while I braise off the meats, because we're going to braise them off first for a little bit before we add our veg. But we're going to add to each one of these. We're going to add some butter. We're going to add some broth, and I'm using bone broth and also bouillon, beef bouillon, beef bone broth. I didn't have any bones in the freezer to make some fresh broth, so we're doing store-bought. And sometimes people would take this opportunity to build a roux, like you would for most other kinds of stews and stuff, to thicken it up. But we're going to try to keep this kind of runny because we're going to let it cook down, and we don't want to make it too thick. So we're going to go in with a couple of our bouillon cubes. And 2 of our bare bones bone broth. These are really good. They got a lot of stuff in them. Really good. I like them. You can make a cup of bone broth soup if you wanted to with it. It's like tea packets or liquid IV or whatever. So if you in a pinch, it gives you just enough for 8 ounces. So since we're going to be cooking this down quite a bit, trying to make sure we get a bunch of flavor in here outside of what the brisket's going to bring. And we'll go with 1 more stick of butter in here, since this is the bigger pot. Christmas and stuff, all the leftover butters and whatnot we had for bacon that we didn't get to all the baking. And this is warm water, it's not hot, because didn't have enough available to do that. So I'm filling it up probably about 2 inches deep. We'll add more later as we need it. Go ahead and just give it a whisk. Try to mix up some of that broth and bouillon cubes a little bit. Get some of it blended in with the water. We'll do the same thing with this other one, and then we'll get our meat out. All right, our brisket's looking really good. Got a nice good crust on it. Like I said, these things got up to about 165 degrees internal temperature. So we got them to a good inside internal temp. We got a good crust on them. This is normally about the time you'd wrap them to let them get through the stall. So instead of doing that, we're putting them in to make stew. So we're gonna go ahead and cube this up into some smaller pieces. You don't have to go too small, but enough to where you can move it around in the pot a little bit. Look at a good smoke ring on that, man. Season them up a little bit and put a full tray on this and put this in with some fat and some butter and make these cook down some more. Be nice. For some burn ends. Take and put a little bit of this bone broth in there. Little bit of water. We'll set these in there after we season them up with some more of that salt, pepper, garlic, and the gunpowder. We'll let that cook. We'll check back in. All right, so now we've had some time for this stuff to render down some, and now we're going to add our vegetables to it. We're going to take and add some of our potatoes, add some of our onions. So I chopped up 4 medium onions. Don't know if I'll use all this. Go ahead and get a decent amount in there. I chopped up a whole bag of celery, a whole bag of carrots. The reason you want to add your vegetables in after the meat's had a chance to render down a little bit in the pot with the broth and stuff is so that way, as it breaks down, you're not going to end up with veggies that are just disintegrated. Because I checked the temperature of this meat and it's about 190. So we're going to let this cook down some more. And hopefully by the time the meat is fall apart tender, so are vegetables. If it looks like we need to add more liquid, we can. But that just adds to the time on the heat. So just remember that. And also with the temperature outside, we've had to add some time because of it cools off so easy out here. And you want to cut up the potatoes in decent sized chunks, but bite size as well. So just remember. And there is no right or wrong way of quantity. More vegetables, less vegetables, more meat, less meat. And this one's closer to the fire. I might switch this one with the other one because this meat's already starting to get a little fall apart. And I will probably add a little more liquid later on. And that is most of our vegetables. All right, our burnt ends are looking good. They're not quite at temp yet, but they're also just sizzling away over there, just stirring them up occasionally. So let me swap these around and we'll be done. Keep this party going. All right, we're going to check on this, see how we look. It's getting soft. Potatoes are done. I was expecting this to be a little more pull apart meat-wise. I might have put the vegetables in too soon. I'll pull these off and put them on the stove to simmer, and we'll check it a little later. I'm with my cousin Brent Beecham on my chow line. Man, thanks for coming and hanging out with us today. It's the day after the snowstorm hit us.
Your snowstorm, not mine.
Yeah, well, and the funny thing is you're like 3 hours kind of northwest of me, and it's like we got like 2 to 3 inches of snow. My mom lives 3 hours north of me, and she got nothing. Freezing temperatures, but nothing. And then like down on the coast, where it's supposed to be warmer. Right. They got like 3 or 4 inches of snow. It's crazy.
Yeah. Weather's funny like that, isn't it?
It is. It is. Well, cheers. Thanks for coming on and talking with me. I haven't seen you since, what was it? Your mom's birthday party?
Yeah. Or did we went to
Barrington? Yeah, Barrington right after. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. In fact, I'm working on my guy's editing a video for that because I cooked the brisket.
Right.
I recorded some of that brisket. I don't know how well it turned out. He's going to edit it around and see if he can make it work. But I want to dedicate that video to Uncle Mike.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. I've been waiting for that video to come out. I kept thinking, well, maybe I missed one.
Well, no. So what happens is a lot of times if one of my video editor is really backed up with a lot of stuff. He's in a band, and then he also does video editing for other stuff, and he's been on the touring. So I'm kind of at his mercy a little bit, but also I also have to tell him what I'm looking for. And I upload all my stuff to we have a shared Google Drive that we use to get between. And I upload it, and I have to tell him which one I want him to work on. And then, not always can he get to it today or tomorrow or the next day. It might be a week or two. And this one that one slipped through the cracks. I had a couple that slipped through the cracks. I mean, I interviewed Todd Wood back in the summer, and I just got that video uploaded. It's like I forgot I thought it had already gone up, and I started scrolling through my videos, and I'm like, wait a minute, what happened to this one? Why did this one not get posted?
Yeah, I just saw that came out right after the one that I did with his channel the other day. And I thought it was maybe a coincidence that you had interviewed him at the same time that he had just interviewed me. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting that you guys had talked. And now that kind of gives me some enlightens things a little bit.
If you notice in that video, I was in a t-shirt, and I've only been in a t-shirt like a month ago.
Maybe it warmed up in Augusta or something. Who knows?
Well, I mean, it does do that around here. I mean, it'll be snow on the ground, and then tomorrow it'll be 80.
Right. Exactly.
So, but yeah, you work with Todd, and you collaborate and work at what does CDM stand for again?
Creative Destruction Media.
Creative Destruction Media, which Armed Forces Press is a subsidiary of CDM.
Yeah. Yeah, he started Creative Destruction Media to kind of just overlay over some other things. So way back when he saw an opportunity, he started the very first online paper he did was one called Tsarism, and he was filling a gap in Eastern Europe. And actually, it all kind of started with Ukraine. He was spending a lot of time in Russia and Ukraine, and nobody was covering that. And that was 10 years ago when the war, basically it was a civil war back then, was going on between Russian separatists and eastern Ukraine that were backed obviously by Russia. And so he was kind of filling in some gaps that nobody was covering. In fact, he uncovered the whole Biden scandal, and nobody listened to him. It's just a bunch of rumors, and nobody listened. If you look back at Tsarism way back at that point, he was saying, well, yeah, there was some stuff going on, and now everybody goes, oh yeah, we've uncovered all these scandals that went on with Biden and Hunter Biden particularly, and now of course if you just listened to him, and he came to me and said, hey, there's obviously bias reporting on Israel. Would you want to do something on the kind of an Israeli channel? And I thought, okay, we're going to play off this. It was called Tsarism. I said, how about Zionism? So I started the Zionism channel, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. He's got all these little smaller papers, and he's got one, for Georgia. He's got one for Miami for the South Florida market. He's got one for Manhattan. He's got one in Colorado, and all those things kind of had to like roll up into one big overall channel to make it make sense. And construction, creative construction media was the thing, and then of course that's a mouthful to say. So CD Media, and then just CDM is kind of the overall brand.
Yep. All right. Well, so I shared a little bit of your story originally on the channel way back when. In fact, if anybody wants to check that video out where I share a story that Brent sent me from his time in the Air Force Academy, you can go back and see that video. It's probably listed in with one of the cooks. I should have his name, Brent Beecham, listed in it, and I'll link it in the video. But kind of give us a synopsis of your career in the military, where you went, and or leading up to the military, and then after the military.
Yeah, so my dad was a Delta pilot, and so I think literally my first word was bird as I was pointing at an airplane, and that they tell me that I said that. I think I believe that, and I always wanted to be a pilot, but I didn't want to be an airline pilot. In fact, I have the magazine actually behind me in a drawer. My mom kept it from, I think it was 1972, the first flight of the F-15, Aviation Week in Space Technology. I sat there as a 8-year-old and said, I'm going to fly that airplane. That was my goal in life, is go fly F-15s. And there's lots of ways to get there. I pursued several different paths, National Guard, et cetera. And, I tried to go, I wanted to go to the Naval Academy. I thought flying off an aircraft carrier sounded like a really cool idea. Glad I didn't. And I applied to the Air Force Academy, got my nomination to the Academy from White's Fowler, my congressman from Georgia, and went there in 1982. Side note to that was in 1980 or 79 when Jimmy Carter was president, and we had that failed attempt to rescue. I just was a reminder of that when Jimmy Carter died. How it really killed my spirit of thinking about going to the military, and only after Reagan was elected and kind of reignited my desire to go into the military, because I think, do I really want to join a military that's failing that badly? And Reagan reignited my desire to go in the military. Again, I went in 1982. I was in the class of 86. I went 4 years to the Air Force Academy. Went to pilot training in 1986. Actually, I met my wife in the summer of 85. I went with the Air Force Academy. We went to the Israeli Air Force for a 3-week joint meeting with them. I met my wife the first night I was there. We got married a year later, and we were stationed at Columbus Air Force Base. So my wife, her first place in the U.S. she had ever been to was Columbus, Mississippi, which was a rude awakening. Just like,
welcome to the
South. Wasn't exactly the metropolis that she was expecting. So after finishing pilot training, I got assigned to F-15s. We went to Alamogordo, New Mexico, at Holloman Air Force Base to do fighter lead-in training, where you basically learn the ins and outs of just how to be a fighter pilot. How to talk, how to speak on the radio, how to do things with your hands. Just the basic terminology, that kind of thing. And then we went to Arizona to do the replacement training unit to fly the F-15. That's a 6-month course, and then we were assigned to Langley Air Force Base in Virginia, where I was there for 4 years. And then during that period of time, in 1990, course, the Saddam invaded Kuwait. They were absolutely certain he was going to invade Saudi Arabia, try to take the oil fields, which I'm sure he would have. We deployed on the 7th of August of 1990, and we were there until the 7th of March of 1991. While we were there, like normally in a typical fighter pilot, you flew about 200 hours a year. I think I flew like 450 hours in 7 months we were there.
Wow.
And then the 6 weeks of the air war, I think I flew 175 hours, which like almost an entire year in 6 weeks. It was a brutal, I mean, like we were flying 9-hour combat missions at night in the weather. It was like you get down on the ground and just like pour you out of the cockpit. But
Fatigue.
yeah, so then after Gulf War was over, we came back, and I tell you what, they talk about PTSD. There's PTSD, I think, like nightmares, and that's kind of one form of it. I think probably the other is maybe an adrenaline addiction. You got back and there's this sense like, okay, now what? You go back to training missions, and they're, the regulations, and they treated us like we were, like we were from the Wild West and we had to be retamed. They called this thing called rebluing. They made us fly missions with guys that had stayed home and never flew in combat. And we're like going, you're going to make us fly with these guys because you don't trust us? Like, what the heck? And, there was this sense they're going to draw down the Air Force. The Clinton era was about to come along, and it was kind of like, you know what? I think it's time to get out. And we ended up immigrating to Israel at that point and lived there for 6 years. So that was kind of interesting period of time.
Well, how did, I mean, not all of us understand the whole thing, but I know you married, she was an Israeli citizen. She, so now is she a dual citizenship now?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, yeah. So when we got married, like 2 days later, we went down to the U.S. consulate in our embassy in Tel Aviv, and she got a green card like immediately. Like, if you were married to an American military member, you got some preference. So she got her green card the first day, like, within a couple of days of being married. And then 3 years and 1 day later, she went down and got sworn in as an American citizen. So, and then when we immigrated, I got dual citizenship. So all of our family has dual citizenship.
Awesome. Yeah. And so, well, do they have a requirement in Israel like we do in the States? Like, say, if you want to speed up your citizenship process to serve in the military, that kind of thing. Because there's a lot of people that come on a green card or whatever, and they serve in the military, and that's how they can get into the citizenship program faster, even though it doesn't always work out here in the States.
Right.
Well, it should, but
it's automatic citizenship. If you're Jewish or you're married to an Israeli, it's basically automatic citizenship.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's not faster. There's some applications of, but it's within 6 months you can get citizenship there.
Okay. Well, and so I remember, of course, I was young still back then, but I remember y'all lived in an area that was close to a border. Is that correct? Where you originally lived when you first got there?
Yeah, so we lived up north, and we lived on the Sea of Galilee, which they call it the Kinnerets, the lake.
Right.
And then we moved up temporarily. We live in the Golan, which is like, it is the frontier. Like you walk out your front yard and there's like minefields that were old Syrian minefields they never cleared. That was kind of interesting. Hey, don't cross this fence, you might get blown up. That was kind of, that was interesting. And then I was drafted into the Israeli military in my first base. I was active duty for a year. The base that I was assigned to, if you remember back in this latest conflict, remember they fired some missiles at this one base in southern Israel, and then they had some actually hit the base. That was the base we were assigned to. So it's a base called Nevatim, and it was built by the U.S. To replace bases that Israel had in the Sinai. And when they withdrew for the peace treaty with Egypt, the U.S. Compensated them by building a base. They built 3 different bases. One of them was Nevatim. And Nevatim actually is a base that the U.S. deploys. It was a forward deployment base for U.S. forces in the Middle East. So they put all kinds of weapons there. If you went there, over the 20 years that we were deployed in Afghanistan, you would find U.S. military, mostly transports, there every day. So it's a massive, massive base, and we had all kinds of weapons there that they were using to forward base so they could deploy it to either to Iraq or Afghanistan or to whatever war we were going to go fight next.
The stew is done now. The meat's fairly well broken up. Get a little bit here. I'll put the rest. Put the lid back on. Keep from getting too much rain in it. It's raining. It was snowing and sleeting earlier. Now it's back to raining again. It's going back and forth between it all day. So here we go. Brisket, potatoes, onions, carrots. Let's give it a taste, shall we? See if I didn't screw this up. That's super hot. That is super tender. Oh, wow. Needs a little more platoon sergeant. That brisket, nice and tender. It cuts up pretty good with the spoon there. Breaks up. And potatoes are not too soft either. I was worried about that. I was worried I put them in too early. But they're pretty solid still. But everything is tender and juicy, flavorful. Even as cold as it is out here, that is hot. Oh, that's perfect. Everything is just like, it's solid enough when you get that stew. And I like it runnier like this. Some people like it really thick. I like it soupy like this. This is very soupy, the way our family likes it. If you wanted it thicker, just make a roux before you put and put it in there, or you can add some cornstarch. I'll make a cornstarch slurry or a roux slurry to put in with it, like a gravy that would give you that thickening agent to it. But this is really good. Well, it's cold. My hands are getting cold even though this is hot. And I'm getting wet because it's sleeting, raining, snowing mix here in Georgia. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed this. It's a great way to use brisket. It's a little cheaper than chuck roast. In fact, I think I was going to get 2 big chuck roasts, and the 2 big chuck roasts were like 3 or 4 pounds smaller than the brisket, and the brisket was cheaper by like $4 or $5 than the chuck roast. That's why I chose to do it. Normally, I would have cooked the brisket whole and do it slices and all that kind of stuff, and then just use whatever's left over. But this way works out really good, and it was a little cheaper. So if you're in a pinch, it's better than chuck roast. But it's wintertime, time to have good stews. This works, and the flavor, you can taste the smoke. It's good. Grill Your Ass Off seasonings, Armed Forces Press. Check them out. See y'all next time.